So you're with your honey, and you're making out when the phone rings. You answer it, and the voice is, "What are you doing with my daughter?" You tell your girl, and she say, "My dad is dead." Then who was phone? Hello everybody, I'm Sam, and you are listening to Chilliteracy, where tonight we have a selection of spooky stories to get through. I hope that cold open wasn't too much for you all. I'm feeling quite chilled. Yeah, hi, hello, welcome. Amos, thank you for the sub and the terrifying ghost story, and Parola as well. Sam's gone away to read about some ghosts, but I'm right here. I've been here all along. Sam lived 15 years ago. I don't know. Hi, hello. Had a shingles vaccination yesterday, and suddenly your body aches are kicking in. Oh no! Nice to have a spooky stream to chill to. I shall do my best. I've been here the whole time. Excuse me, burping. Hi, hello everyone. So, full disclosure, I nearly decided not to stream this evening. But, why not keep up the hot streak of just not streaming? Because I've been feeling a little bit ill today. I'm doing a little bit better this evening. So I thought I will give it a go. I have 3 stories. 1 that will take like half a stream, and 2 that will together take about half a stream. So I'm going to see how many of those I can get through. And so they're a little bit different this time in that I've not been able to find texts online for any of them, because one of them, I can throw this out as a challenge to you, if you want. One of them is by an author who she wrote under a pseudonym. Yeah, okay, yeah, I was waiting. Wait a minute. Oh, hello. Okay. So yeah, I'll put the names in chat. So the first, well, not the first one. The order isn't going to be this, but I think the one that you've got the best chance of finding is The Whispering Wall. That's because I got that wrong. The Whispering Wall by H.D. Everett, which is Henrietta Dorothy Everett, and she wrote under the pseudonym of Theo Douglas. So I'll give you that. What was it? High definition Everett. I should spell that correctly there. What button did I press to take that to the end screen? Sorry, what shortcut do I have that did that? I broke the stream of spelling. I did. Hang on a second. What hotkey did that? That takes us to the break. And oh, I pressed end. Right, yes, because I have, right, yeah, no, I remember. Oh, okay, hang on. I'm wasting time doing this, and there's stuff actually happening. Right. Llama, hello, welcome. You're not late. I've literally just started, I'm just sitting here rambling, wasting time, and then breaking the stream, and then I went away. Thunder, thank you for the 41 months. Thank you for being wonderful and for lovely 41 months right back at you. Thank you for putting good into the world. Yes, you did borrow an edit by catchphrase, but it's relevant. Well, yeah, thank you. I maintain it's any goodness that comes from this space is a product of everybody. Lucy and I just provide the venue for it, but thank you very much. Suddenly Elvis. On it, yeah, okay, good luck. So I managed to find, I think it was that one. I managed to find an archive.org version that you couldn't look at unless you logged in with your free account, and that's not good enough. But that's the one that is actually, in theory, should be out of copyright. So I would expect possibly somewhere there might be buried in the depths of the internet a text that you can find. But yes, it seems a little bit complicated because she published under the pseudonym Theo Douglas, and very little though her works were rather popular and her identity was revealed during her lifetime in 1910, relatively little is known about her life, and her works were long overlooked, until recent efforts to recover the work of forgotten women writers. So... I said archive, you thought I was talking about AO3? No, sadly not that kind of archive. And so, yeah, that's one of them, The Whispering Wall, and good luck finding that. And then the other two are by much more recent authors, which, as I say, is something unusual for us here, because we don't tend to do that. We tend to do stuff that is older and out of copyright and in the public domain. But since we're not, like, recording them for, you know, Patreon or Bandcamp, which reminds me I need to do some Patreon recordings. Sorry, everybody. Since we're not doing them for that and, like, selling them as our own product, I figure we're probably safe. Lady Mephistopheles, thank you very much for the 27 months. Good tired zone. Yeah, right. You don't know your own name, but you sleep at your new place tonight. Hell yeah. Congratulations. That's super awesome. So you've got loads of work to get done, editing your presentation, but hopefully be in and out. No worries at all. As always, you know, at your own leisure. Nobody is expected to be here. Be here as much or as little as you want. That's completely fine. There's no apologies at all. Completely fine. Yeah, Lucy is away. She is in another country and currently does not have very good access to internet, so you've just got me this evening. If anyone rocks up into chat to be weird, don't worry, I'll deal with it as and when. Just ignore them. Don't worry about it. Yeah, the other two stories. I'm just going to bung them all into chat and let you figure it out. Let's see if I can... Dr. Matthew's ghost story. Whoa, let's type that in the right place, not start pressing more shortcuts. Rimbo, hello, welcome. Wait, what's that? Yeah, Matthew's ghost story. I can totally remember names. That's another one that I was going to read. And all of this is, like, assuming I can get to them. And then, if she bends, she breaks. By... Nope. John Gordon. This is actually the one that I think I will start with tonight. If She Bends, She Breaks by John Gordon. Because I really enjoyed it. And... yeah, I'm hoping to get through all three stories this evening, but if I don't, if I suddenly feel rough for the break or whatever, this is the one that I want to have read. Because, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I don't want to, like, hype stuff up. If you enjoy it, you can enjoy it. If not, you know, I don't want you to go in with, you know, unfairly elevated expectations. But, you know, those are the stories. Enjoy. I said that like I was gonna... Okay, cool, peace, thanks, I'm out. Go read them yourself, I don't care. No, that's not what's happening. I'm gonna read you some stories in a second. Just clearing notifications. Chillitracy's gone live. Oh, sick, you should go watch them. Yeah, I guess. I don't know, if we're good, if we're ready, we've got some stuff to get through. So... yeah, I apologise, there's no text to link at the top of chat. These aren't, as far as I can find in my, you know, it's not extensive, but a few minutes research this afternoon. These weren't ones that I could find available, like, pasted somewhere on the internet for me to stick here. So I apologise for that. But, yeah, if you are listening along, I hope you enjoy. And yeah, I shall find the first page of the first story that I'm going to read, which is that one mentioned there in chat. The Whispering Wall was published in Novel Magazine in 1916. That checks out, but I could not find a text for it. So I mean, yeah, if you find it. Pathy Trust has one edition of Novel Magazine from 1906. Yeah, no, Welcome to my world. Right. I'm going to read a story because, we could spend all evening... Tell you what, let's make this a quiz for Dave. Dave can go and find the stories, I guess, and we'll give someone points if they find them first. I don't know. Right. Let's have a story. Let's do a story. This one is a ghost story. It's called If She Bends, She Breaks, by John Gordon. Ben had felt strange ever since the snow started falling. He looked out of the classroom window and saw that it had come again, sweeping across like a curtain. That was exactly what it seemed to be, a curtain. The snow had come down like a blank sheet in his mind, and he could remember nothing beyond it. He could not even remember getting up this morning or walking to school. Yesterday was only a haze, and last week did not exist. And now, at this moment, he did not know whether it was morning or afternoon. He began to get to his feet, but dizziness made him sit down. "I know it's been freezing hard." Miss Carter's voice from the front of the class seemed distant. He wanted to tell her he felt unwell, but just for the moment he did not have the energy. She had her back to the stove as usual, and the eyes behind her glasses stared like a frightened horse's, as they always did when she was in a passion. "It's been freezing hard," she repeated, "but the ice is still far too dangerous, and nobody is to go anywhere near it. Do you understand?" Tommy Drake, in the next desk to Ben, murmured something and grinned at somebody on Ben's other side, but he ignored Ben completely. "Tommy Drake!" Miss Carter had missed nothing. "What did you say?" "Nothing, miss." "Then why are you grinning like a jackass? If there's a joke, we all want to hear it. On your feet." As Tommy pushed back his chair, Ben smiled at him weakly, but Tommy seemed to be in no mood for him and winked at somebody else as though Ben himself was not there. "Well?" Miss Carter was waiting. Tommy stood in silence. "Very well. If you are not going to share your thoughts with the rest of us, perhaps you will remind me of what I was saying a moment ago." "About the ice, miss." "And what about the ice?" "That it's dangerous, miss." Then Tommy, who did not lack courage, went on. "What I was saying was that you can always tell if it's safe." "Oh, you can you?" Miss Carter pursed her lips and again waited. "If she cracks, she bears," said Tommy. "If she bends, she breaks." It was a lesson they all knew from the flat fenland where everybody skated in winter. A solid cracking sound in the ice was better than a soft bending, but it meant nothing to Miss Carter. "Stuff and nonsense," she cried. "But everybody knows it's true." Tommy had justice on his side, and his round face was getting red. "Old wives' tales." Miss Carter was not going to listen to reason. "Sit down." Ben saw that Tommy was going to argue, and the sudden urge to back him up made him forget his dizziness. He got to his feet. "It's quite true, miss," he said. "I've tried it out." She paid no attention to him. She glared at Tommy. "Sit down." Tommy obeyed, and Miss Carter pulled her cardigan tighter over her dumpy figure. "Listen to me, all of you." Her voice was shrill. "I don't care what anybody says in the village. I won't have any of you go anywhere near that ice. Do you hear? Nobody." She paused, and then added softly, "You all know what can happen." She had succeeded in silencing the classroom. As she turned away to her own desk, she muttered something to the front row, who began putting their books away. It was time for break. Ben was still standing up. In her passion, she seemed not to have seen him. "What's up with her?" he said, but Tommy was on his feet and heading towards the cloakroom with the rest. The dizziness came over Ben again. Could nobody see that he was unwell? Or was his illness something so terrible that everybody wanted to ignore it? The classroom had emptied, and Miss Carter was wiping her nose on a crumpled paper handkerchief. He would tell her how he felt, and perhaps she would get his sister to walk him home with him. He watched her head swing towards him, and he opened his mouth to speak, but her glance swept over him and she turned to follow the others. A movement outside one of the classroom's tall, narrow windows made him look out. One boy was already in the yard, and the snow was thick and inviting. Beyond the railings there was the village, and through a gap in the houses he could see the flat fens stretching away in a desert of whiteness. He knew it all. He had not lost his memory. The stuffiness of the classroom was to blame, and outside there was delicious coolness and space. Without bothering to follow the others to the cloakroom for his coat, he went out. There was still only the boy in the playground, a new kid kicking up snow. He was finding the soft patches not already trodden, and as he ploughed into them he made the snow smoke around his ankles so that he almost seemed to lack feet. Ben went across to him and said, "I let you out early, did they?" The new kid raised his head and looked at the others who were now crowding out through the door. "I reckon," he said. "Me and all," said Ben. It wasn't strictly true, but he didn't mind bending the truth a bit, as he had been feeling ill. Not any more. "Where'd you come from?" he asked. "Over yonder." The new kid nodded vaguely behind the railings and then went back to kicking snow. "It's warm, ain't it?" he said, watching the powder drift around his knees. "When you get used to it." "What do your dad do?" "Horseman," said the kid, and that was enough to tell Ben where he lived and where his father worked. Only one farm for miles had working horses. Tommy's family, the Drakes, had always had horses and were rich enough to have them working alongside tractors as a kind of hobby. "You live along Pingle Bank, then?" said Ben. The horseman had a cottage there near the edge of the big drainage canal, the Pingle, that cut a straight, deep channel across the flat fens. "That's right," said the kid, and looked up at the sky. "More of it coming." The clouds had thickened over the winter sun, and, in the grey light, snow had begun to fall again. The kid held his face up to it. "Best time of the year, winter. Brings you out in the open, don't it?" "Reckon," Ben agreed. "If them clouds was in summer, we should be getting soaked." "I hate getting wet." The kid's face was pale, and snow was resting on his eyelashes. "Me and all." They stood side by side and let the snow fall on them. The kid was quite right. It seemed warm. Then the snowball fight rolled right up to them, and charging through the middle of it came Tommy pulling Ben's sister on her sledge. Just like him to have taken over the sledge and Jenny and barge into the new kid as though he was nobody. Ben stooped, rammed snow into two hard fistfuls and hurled them with all his force at Tommy's red face. He was usually a good shot, but he missed, and Tommy was yelling at Jenny as she laboured to make snowballs and pile them on the sledge. "They ain't no good. Look, they're falling apart." Tommy crouched and swept them all back into the snow. Jenny had no height, but a lot of temper. She was on her feet, her face as red as his, and yanked her sledge away. "Bring that back," he yelled, but Ben was already charging at him. Tommy must have been off balance, because it took no more than a touch to push him sideways and send him into the snow flat on his back. "You want to leave my sister alone?" Ben sat on his chest with his knees on Tommy's arms. "Tell her you're sorry." He and Tommy were the same size, both strong, and sometimes they banged their heads together just to see who would be the first to back off. But this time, without any effort, or even bothering to answer him, Tommy sat up and spilled Ben off his chest as though he had no weight at all. And as he tilted back helplessly, Ben saw the new kid standing by, watching. "Aye," he shouted. "Snowball fight! You're on my side!" The kid looked pretty useful, pale but solid, and Ben needed help. "You done it wrong," the new kid said to Ben, and without hurrying he stepped forward. The kid reached out to where Tommy was still sitting and put a hand over his face, spreading out pale, cold fingers across his mouth and eyes. He seemed merely to stroke him, but Tommy fell backwards. "You don't need no pressure," said the kid. "All you got to do is let him know you're there." "You got him!" Ben had rolled away to let the kid tackle Tommy alone. "Show us your stuff!" The kid seemed to be in no hurry, and Tommy lay where he was, one startled eye showing between the pallid fingers. Any second now, and there would be a quick thrust of limbs, and Tommy would send the kid flying. It was stupid to wait for it. Ben started forward to stop the massacre. But then the kid looked up. Snow was still in his eyelashes, and a crust of it was at the corners of his mouth, like ice. "Want me to do any more?" he asked. In the rest of the playground, shouts of snow fights echoed against the high windows and the dark walls of the old school building. But in this corner, the grey cloud seemed to hang lower as if to deaden the kid's voice. "I asked you," he said. "You want me to do some more?" Tommy stirred, gathered himself to push. In a moment the boy would pay for being so careless, unless he had some trick and was pressing on a nerve. Ben wanted to see what would happen. He nodded. The kid did not look away from Ben, but his hand left Tommy's face, and Tommy did not get up. He simply lay there with his eyes and mouth wide open. He looked scared. The kid, still crouching, began to stroke the snow. He curved his fingers and raked it, dusting the white powder into Tommy's hair, then over his brow and his eyes, and then the kid's hand, so pale it could not be seen in the snow, was over Tommy's lips, and snow was being thrust into the gaping mouth. The kid leant over him, and Tommy was terrified. He tried to shout, but more snow was driven into his mouth. He rolled over, thrashing helplessly. The kid paused as though waiting for instructions, but Ben, curious to see what Tommy would do, waited. It was then that the brittle little sound of a handbell reached them. It came from the porch where Miss Carter was calling them in. But suddenly the sound ceased, and even the shouting of the snow fights died. The whole playground had seen her drop the bell. She started forward, pushing her way through the crowds, and then, caught up in her anxiety, they came with her like black snowflakes on the wind. It was Tommy, jerking and choking on the ground, that drew them. It was no natural fooling in the snow. He was fighting to breathe, and the new kid stood over him, looking down. "Tommy, what have you done?" Miss Carter was stooping over him, crying out at the sight of his mouth wide open and full of whiteness. "Oh my God!" Ben stared across her, bent back at the new kid. He simply stood where he was, a sprinkle of white in the short crop of his black hair, and gazed back at him. "Who did this to you?" Miss Carter had thrust her fingers into the snow gape in Tommy's face and rolled him over so that he was coughing, gasping, and heaving all at once. "How did it happen?" But he could not answer, and she helped him to his feet and began walking with him. "Who saw it? Which of you did this?" She had snow in her fur-lined boots, and her grey hair was untidy. Her little red nose was sharp with the cold, and she pointed it round the ring that had gathered, sniffing out the guilty one. "You?" Her eyes were on Ben, but had passed by almost before he had shaken his head. "What about you?" The new kid was at the back of the crowd, and did not even have to answer. Denials came from every side, and the chattering crowd followed her into school. Ben and the kid hung back, and were alone in the porch when the door closed and shut them out. Neither had said a word, and Ben turned towards him. The kid stood quite still, gazing straight ahead, as though the door was the open page of a book, and he was reading it. He wore a long black jacket, and a grey scarf was wound once around his neck and hung down his back. Ben noticed for the first time that the kid's black trousers were knee-length and were tucked into long, thick socks. They looked like riding breeches, and he thought the kid must help his father with the horses. But his boots were big and clumsy, not elegant like a horseman's. There was something gawky about him. He looked poor and old-fashioned. "You done all right," said Ben, Tommy ain't bad in a fight. The kid turned towards him. There was still unmelted snow on his cheeks, and his eyelashes were tinged with white. His dark eyes were liquid, as though he was on the verge of crying, but that was false. They had no expression at all. "He ain't as good as you reckon," said the kid, and left it at that. "What class are you in?" Ben asked. "Same as you." "Didn't notice you." "I'm by the stove." "Miss Carter always keeps a bum to that, that's why it don't throw out no heat," said Ben. But the kid did not smile. He led the way inside. They had not been missed. Miss Carter was still fussing around Tommy. She had pulled the fire guard back from the stove so that he could go to the front of the class and sit close to it. But she was still angry. "I'm going to watch whoever did that to you. So I'm going to catch whoever did that to you, and when I do—" She pinched in her little mouth until it was lipless, and her eyes needled round the room. Ben had taken his usual place at the back, and suddenly he realized the new kid had wandered off. He searched and found him. He was sitting at a desk no more than 2 paces from Miss Carter and Tommy. He had one arm over the desk lid, and the other resting loosely on the back of his chair. He was quite untroubled. "Stand up, Tommy," Miss Carter ordered. "Now turn round and point out who did this terrible thing." Tommy, a hero now, was enjoying himself. He faced the class. Ben could see the pale curve of the new kid's cheek and guessed at the deep-water look of the eyes that were turned on Tommy. "Tommy," said Miss Carter, and obediently Tommy looked round the room. He smirked at several people, but not at Ben. He ignored him as though angry with him for what had happened, and yet not prepared to betray him. But there was a real risk he would get his revenge on the kid. Yet again, his glance went by as though the boy's desk was empty, and he said, "Nobody done it. I just fell over, that's all." The girl next to Ben whispered to her friend, "Maybe he had a fit. That looked like it with his mouth all white, like he was foaming." "Be quiet!" Miss Carter had lost her patience. "Sit down!" She ordered Tommy, and for the rest of the afternoon she was savage, even with him. From time to time, Ben looked towards the new kid, but he kept his head bowed over his work, and Ben saw no more than the black bristles of his cropped hair. Nobody attempted to speak to him, because whenever anybody moved, Miss Carter snapped. The last half-hour dragged, but then, with a rattle of pencils and a banging of desk lids, the afternoon ended. The new kid wasted no time. He was out of the door ahead of everybody else, and Ben did not catch him until he was halfway across the playground. "Where are you going?" he asked. "The Pingle. We ain't supposed to, because of the ice. I live there." Then Ben remembered the horseman's cottage on the bank, but he said, "Ain't you going to hang around here a bit? We got some good slides in the yard." "Ice is better." The others, charging out at the door, prevented Ben saying more. Jenny, with her sledge, was being chased by Tommy. He was himself again, and was telling her, "Your sledge would go great on the Pingle." "I don't want to go," she said. A bigger girl butted in. "You heard what Miss Carter said, Tommy. You heard what Miss Carter said, Tommy Drake. Ain't you got no sense?" Tommy paid no attention. "Come on, Jenny. I ain't got time to go home and fetch me skates, or else I would. I'll bring 'em tomorrow and you can have a go. Promise." He was tempted, but she said, "I don't want to go there, and you know why." "I won't take a step on it unless it's rock hard," said Tommy. "I ain't going," said Jenny. At the school gate, the kid moved his feet impatiently on the step. It had been cleared of snow, and the metal studs on his boots rattled. Tommy had also lost his patience. "If she cracks, she bears. If she bends, she breaks. Everybody knows that's true, no matter what the old Carter say, and I won't budge away from the bank unless it's safe." "No," said Jenny. Suddenly the kid kicked at the steps and made sparks fly from the sole of his boot, and Tommy looked up. The wind dived over the school roof in a howl and a plunge of snow, and the kid's voice merged with it as he yelled, "Come on!" He and Ben ran together, and Tommy grabbed at the sledge and made for the gate. Several others came with him. Ben and the boy kept ahead of the rest as they rounded the corner into the lane. Traffic had failed to churn up the snow and had packed it hard, almost icy, so that it would have been as good as anywhere for Jenny's sledge, but Ben ran with the boy between hedges, humps and white, and the others followed. They left the road just before it climbed to the bridge across the Pingle, and they stood at the top of the bank looking down. They were the first to come here. The grass blades, slowly arching as the snow had added petal after petal through the day, supported an unbroken roof just clear of the ground. Below them, the straight, wide channel stretched away to left and right through the flat, white land. The water had become a frozen road, and the wind had swept it almost clear, piling the snow in an endless smooth drift on the far side. 1 second, Joey wants to leave. Resuming my seating position. Tommy had come up alongside them. "You could go for miles," he shouted. But Jenny hung back. "I don't like it." The air was grey and cold, and it almost smothered her small voice. "I want to go home." "It ain't dark yet." His voice yelped as though it came from the lonely seagull that angled up on a frozen gust far out over the white plain. He began to move forward. "Let's get down there." "She doesn't want to go." Ben was close to him, but Tommy paid no heed. "Nobody's going down the bank, Tommy." Ben stepped forward, blocking his way. "Nobody." Tommy came straight on. His eyes met Ben's, but their expression did not change. His whole attention was focused on the ice below, and his gaze seemed to go through Ben as though he was not there. In a sudden, cold anger, Ben lowered his head and lunged with both arms. He thrust at Tommy's chest with all his force. His fingers touched, but in the instant of touching they lost their grip. He thrust with all his power, but it was air alone that slid along his arms and fingers, and Tommy was past him and through and plunging down the bank. The kid, watching him, said, "You still don't do it right." Tommy had taken Jenny's sledge with him, and at the ice edge he turned and shouted to them up the bank. "Come on, all of you." "No." Ben stood in front of them. "Don't go." He opened his arms, but they came in a group straight for him. "Stop!" They did not answer. Their eyes did not look directly at him. They pushed into him like a crush of cattle, pretending he was not there. He clutched at one after another, but the strange weakness he had felt earlier made him too flimsy to stop anything, and they were beyond him and going down to join Tommy. "I've got to teach you a few things," said the kid. "I don't feel too good," said Ben. "I think I ought to go home." The boy gazed at him for a moment with eyes that again seemed to be rimmed with frost and shook his head. "There's them down there to see," he said. Slowly, Ben nodded. He had to think of Jenny. They went down together and found Tommy still on the bank. Frozen reeds stood up through the ice, and there was a seepage of water at the edge that made them all hesitate. All except the new kid. He put one foot on it, testing. "If she cracks, she bears," he said. Ben watched. The boy had plenty of courage. He was leaning forward now, putting all his weight on the ice. "She cracks," he said. But Ben had heard nothing. "No," he called out. "She bends." He was too late. The boy had stepped out onto the ice. Then Ben heard the crack under his boots and the echo of it ringing from bank to bank and away along the endless ice in thin winter music. The boy moved out until he was a figure in black in the middle of the channel. "She bears!" he called out, and Ben, who knew he could never stop the others now, stepped out to be with him. There was no crack this time, but the ice held. He could feel the gentle pulse of it as he walked towards the middle. There was something almost like a smile on the new kid's face. "Both of us done it," he said, and Ben nodded. On the bank, there was a squabble. The big girl, protecting Jenny, was trying to pull the sledge rope from Tommy. "Let her have the sledge," she said. "You didn't ought to have brung her here." "That's safe enough. I don't care whether it's safe or not. You didn't ought to have brung her here. Not Jenny, of all people." "Why all the fuss about Jenny?" said Ben to the kid. "I don't know what they're going on about." "Don't you?" The kid's eyes, darkening as the day dwindled, rested on him. Far away along the length of the frozen channel, snow and sky and darkness joined. "Why don't they come out here?" said Ben. "They can see us." "We can go fetch 'em," said the kid. "How?" "Get hold of that sledge. They'll follow." Ben hesitated. Perhaps he was too weak to even do that. The kid saw his doubt and said, "You've pulled a sledge before, ain't you?" Ben nodded. "Well, all you got to do is remember what it feel like. That's all." Ben had to rely on him. Everything he had tried himself had gone wrong. He walked across to where Tommy was still arguing. "See what you done to her," the girl was saying. She had her arm around Jenny's shoulder, and Jenny was crying, snuffling into her gloves. "Ain't you got no feelings, Tommy Drake?" "Well, just because it happened once," said Tommy. "That ain't to say it's going to happen again." "Wasn't just once." The girl thrust her head forward, accusing him. "That was another time." She lifted her arm from Jenny's shoulder and pointed up the bank behind her. "There was a boy lived up there, along Pingle Bank. He came down here and went through the ice one winter time, and they never found him till it thawed." "That were a long time ago," said Tommy. "Years before any of us was born." "You ought to know about that if anybody do, Tommy Drake. That boy's father worked on your farm. Everybody knows about it, even if that was all them years ago. His father were a horseman and lived along the bank." "Hey!" Ben was close to Tommy, just like the new kid. But even that did not make Tommy turn his way. Ben reached for the sledge rope and jerked it. He felt the rope in his fingers just before it slipped through and fell, but he had tugged it from Tommy's grasp, and the sledge ran out onto the ice. "Come on. Come on, Tommy," he said. "Come with me and the new kid." The girl was watching the sledge and accusing Tommy. "What did you want to do that for?" "I didn't," he said. "I did it," said Ben, but nobody looked towards him. The girl was furious with Tommy. "Just look what you done. Now you'll have to leave it." Tommy had put one foot on the ice, testing it. "I ain't fret," he said. "I reckon it'll hold." "Course it will," Ben encouraged him. "We're both out here, ain't we?" The kid paused and looked over his shoulder to make sure, but the kid was still there, watching. "Two of us, me and him." Tommy had both feet on the ice and had taken another step. "See?" he called to the others on the bank. "Nothing to it." "Don't you make a parade out there by yourself any longer, Tommy Drake." The girl pulled Jenny's face tighter into her shoulder and made an effort to muffle Jenny's ears. She leant forward as far as she could, keeping her voice low so that Jenny should not hear. "Can't you see what you're doing to her? This were just the place where Ben went through the ice last winter." Tommy, stamping to make the ice ring beneath him, kept his back to her. "If she cracks," he said, "she bears. If she bends, she breaks." "Can't you hear?" said the girl. "This is just the place where Ben were drowned." The snow came in a sudden flurry, putting a streaked curtain between Ben and the rest of them. It was then that he remembered. He remembered everything. The kid had come up to stand beside him, and they stood together and watched. The ice under Tommy sagged, as they knew it would. They heard the soft rending as it split, and they saw its broken edge rear up. They heard the yell and the slither, and remembered the cold gulp of the black water that, with years between, had swallowed each of them. But now it was somebody else who slid under. Then Jenny's scream reached Ben through the wind that was pushing down the channel as the night came in. She should be at home, not out here watching this. He stooped to the sledge and pushed. On the bank they saw nothing but a tight spiral of snow whipped up from the ice, but the sledge slid into the water beside Tommy and floated. He grabbed at it. From out on the ice they saw the girl, held by the others, reach from the bank and grasp the rope, and then Tommy, soaking and freezing, crawled into the white snow and made it black. They watched as the whole group, sobbing and murmuring, climbed the bank, showed for a few moments against the darkening sky, and were gone. In the empty channel, the two figures stood motionless. Their eyes gazed unblinking through the swirl as the snow came again, hissing as it blew between the frozen reeds. The end. Story's done. Poor guy. Yeah. I like that one. I really like that one. Like, yeah, if you're certainly on a second on the second read, it's easy to see what's happening. You know, if you've already read the story, it's quite easy to tell what the story is telling you. It reminds you of the terrifying British PSAs from the 1970s and 80s. Yeah, exactly. Like, here are some children playing in a field throwing a frisbee around. Oh no, it's gone into an electrical substation. One of them is about to get 50,000 watts straight to the heart. That, yeah, those were great and terrifying. I feel like it's pretty easy to guess. Yeah, that's it. Like, again, reading it then, I'm like, wow, yeah, if you know the whole, like, who was a ghost all along tropes, then you can pick up on that almost immediately. Like, oh, he's feeling a little bit unwell and nobody's acknowledging him or a single thing that he says. Kid's a ghost. But, yeah. We can work with that. Hi, 1 second. You guessed pretty early on? Yeah, like because I was like speed reading it earlier, and sort of, you know, skimming, speed reading it. It wasn't until, like, they're out in the playground, and the other, because at first they're like, oh, there's a weird new kid here, like, okay, that's the ghost. And then when he's like, no, you're doing it wrong, like, oh, no, they're both ghosts. He doesn't know he's dead. Right, cool, okay. Trickier thing to do in other mediums like film or games. Yeah. Wait, remember, you found both of the others? Damn. Are these, like, hang on, how legal and legit are these? Are these, like, we've not just, hey, here's some pirated stuff. What did you say? Thank you for finding those, I'm impressed. Page 205. Rad. Let's see, I'm gonna check. Joey, that's my leg you're scratching, mate. There's a whisper more. 203. 203? Yeah, page 203. Yeah, nice one. But yeah, I really like that one. Just the, like, so, again, genuinely, like, I nearly, well, yeah, firstly, I nearly didn't do the stream this evening because I was feeling a little bit rough. And I'm feeling okay at the moment. Hey, you want to come up? But the other thing that I nearly did was, like, I really enjoyed reading this. It kind of makes me want to go and figure out some kind of short story of my own. It's one of those, like, I don't know, I love this, and I love how this story makes me feel. I want to go do something with this. Not every day you suddenly have to remember you're dead. Well, unless you're a ghost, in which case, literally every day you have to remember you're dead. Because otherwise, you get stuck like that. But yeah, I don't know. Also, don't ask why, as a short story published in a collection titled Eerie East Anglia, all the kids had northern accents. When I read it earlier, I was like, I'm going to do them like Country Bumpkin sort of, just make them all kind of farmer accents, rural kids, because their speech is written a little bit accented. And then literally when reading the first voice, I'm like, I cannot at all remember what a Country Bumpkin accent sounds like. And I'm not going to suddenly try and pivot into that after I've started doing Northern. So instead they're all Northern kids. And it turns out the author is from Jarrow. So, there. So, yeah, that's... Apologies. But yeah, I felt like I tried to keep it a little bit consistent. I hope that's... hope we're good. Who is Mega New Zealand? And what is this site? Is this like how when we can't find anything on regular Gutenberg, there's Gutenberg Australia that has all the good stuff? Page 129, you say? So I actually got through that a lot faster than I expected. Wonderful, Dr. Matthew's ghost story. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to punt you all over to an early break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do those stories. What is this? Genuinely, is this a dodgy site? Like, are we linking to crimes here? What? Oh, is this like an academic resource site or something? It's where you store files and you need to share. Right, okay. Right, so I won't link these on YouTube. Okay, so if people want to read along, I'll do the links. I'll do the links pinned in chat, but yeah, I don't want to do that on YouTube. But thank you. Let's do them in this order. Wow, that's completely unusable. When I put them like that, good on me. Which one was? Hang on a second. You know what? I'll figure this out over the break. Right, go have a break, 5 minutes, move around, stretch your limbs, get tea, have piss, or whatever the hell else you want to do. And see you back here in 5 minutes for another couple of, in my opinion, very good ghost stories. And I will see you then. Bye for now. we're back. Hello, welcome back. I was a few seconds late because I just suddenly thought, you know what, I've not actually checked how many emote slots we have open still. Just in case that's changed at all. And so I just suddenly thought I would do that. And turns out we have 2 free emote slots open. 2 animated. And a tier 2 and a tier 3. So, you know, I know we come up with ideas all the time and then forget to do anything with them. But, you know, maybe Lucy and I need to get our heads together and sort of figure out something to do with those. Sublime, dude, I guess I'm okay with how bad that one looks. It's still, like, the really bad star twinkle at the end still hurts me. But, you know, that's fine. I did actually download some software one time to try and, there's like some animation studio software that I wanted to try and learn, and then did not. Like so many things. What I'm talking about, it's Sublime. Yeah, but it's bad. So, yeah, I don't know. Well, yeah, it needs to try and figure something out. Because, yeah, it's good. Fun stuff. But animating is difficult and time consuming. So, as you know, as you can see from my simple brief of just make some text move and put like a twinkly star in the end, and how that turned out. But yeah, hi, welcome back. We've had a story and a break. I have Joey on my lap, who is extremely happy to be here because he has not stopped purring since he got up onto me, and so yeah. But should we go on to the next story? If we're ready, if people are coming back and filtering in and whatnot. Yeah. I'll just slowly get myself in. Still working on the puzzle? Hell yeah. There you go. There's your puzzle in chat. Yeah, we're probably going to be through these stories a lot faster than I anticipated. I don't know, it's weird. Like usually, like 20 pages in one of these books is, unless did I just miscount? Can't have miscounted. That was a 20-page story, right? That was, well, ish. Oh no, that was like 15. Whoops. Well, there we go. Yeah, literally. Okay, so that's why we finished early, because it was actually a shorter story than I can count. Trust me. Just not then. So okay, that's why we got through that one faster. There's going to be a shorter stream tonight, but that's okay. Gives us time to do other stuff. I don't know. There's so many things. It's the middle of the weekend. Isn't that exciting? Right. If we are ready, your legit link. Any streams good stream? Well, don't make me put that to the test. I can, believe me, I can do a bad stream. I know. What would I consider to be? I'm trying to think what streams I have done that I would class as like, oh yeah, that was a bad one. And like it's mainly, I think, if I'm doing a stream where there's a game that I'm just really not enjoying. Like that is always a thing where it's like, great, I've told everyone I'm going to be doing a stream, this is the plan. I'm going to play this video game, and you start it and it's just like, oh, I'm meant to be doing this for the next 3, 4, 5 hours. And if you're on your own, it's kind of not so bad because you can wrap up early, or you know, like swap to another game. It's partly why with the co-op stuff with Dave, that's kind of why I said, hey, should we do like just call it a grab bag, we just pick a bunch of co-op games, because I don't know that I'm actually going to enjoy any of these, and I don't want to be committed to something, because if you're on a stream with someone else, then you've suddenly got both yours and their thoughts to account for, and it's not so easy to just go, you know what, I'm not feeling this, can we go on to something else? But if you've got a bunch of games lined up, then it's much easier to do that. So yeah, I think I've had a couple of streams over the years that I've been doing this now where I've just not been enjoying something, but I didn't really feel like I could swap away from it, so you're just going to tough it out playing a game you're not enjoying, which can kind of suck. Yeah, I think those, or just ones where like my whatever computer I've been using has not been playing nicely. Like some of the ones towards the kind of end of the life of the last laptop that I had, where it just wasn't working for some reason, and so trying to play stuff that the frame rate was just not responding properly, no matter what I did. That wasn't fun, but it's a different kind of like not fun bad stream. So yeah. You're here to hang out with chat, you can do whatever you want. Alright. Well, I'm glad to hear it, because currently what that's going to be is drink water and read stories. And I'm actually doing okay for water, so yeah. Kind of got plenty of both. But if we are ready, if we would like, the next story for tonight, this is The Whispering Wall by H.D. Everett. My story begins before the war, though not long before. We were a party of light-hearted undergraduates in Jack Lovell's rooms at Cambridge, and we had been laughing uproariously over some story of psychical marvels. Jack was the only one of us who took the matter seriously. After the others had gone, I said to him, "Surely you didn't believe that farrago of nonsense Smith was telling, did you? I was surprised to hear you argue that it might be true." "Only that it might be true, not that it was. I saw no impossibility. That was all." "Why, old man, you do surprise me. You were the last fellow I should have thought likely to give in to spooks." Jack was smoking. He knocked out his pipe before he answered and began to fill it with deliberation. "And you would have been right when the evidence was hearsay, but the position alters to one who has heard and seen." "Why, you don't mean to say that you—" Jack had his pipe between his teeth again, so he merely nodded. But the nod was enough. "My dear old Jack, but you haven't reflected what cheats these mediums are. They are past masters as conjurers, have to be, and all their spooks are fakes. I know a fellow who is a psychical researcher, and he says, I have not been to mediums. My people live in a house up in the north which has a queer reputation. The old wing is practically shut up, because of what you call spooks, a ghost that is heard rather frequently, and sometimes seen." "And you do not suspect anyone of playing tricks? What, for 150 years on end?" Jack seemed to consider the question, and then he shook his head. "There was no trick about it. No." "Before I believed, I should have to hear and see for myself, and investigate a lot to make sure. I would rather like to try." "Then come to Marchmoor with me next week. We go down then, as you know." "You'll be very welcome. You're not fixed anywhere else?" I had no fixtures, and I accepted the invitation then and there. I received the welcome he promised me, and Jack did not proclaim me a ghost hunter or give me away. Marchmoor was a larger house than I expected. Jack was not one who said much about his family. It was built on 3 sides of a quadrangle, of which the iron gates supplied the 4th, and surrounded by a stretch of parkland. The centre was the family dwelling, with an older wing on your left as you faced the entrance, and a quite modern one on the right, which contained the servants' quarters. The guest chamber allotted to me was in the centre building, but Jack's rooms, bedroom and sitting room together, were on the first floor of the old wing, which was supposed to be the habitat of the ghost. I went off to smoke with Jack when we retired for the night, and found him pleasantly established, with cheerful light and fire, lounge chairs, and every comfort. I suppose I was impatient, for I said as soon as we were alone, "When is the entertainment going to begin, and where is it held?" I did not think Jack quite liked his spooks taken in that spirit. "I told you I could not answer for it, and you might be disappointed." He returned with some sharpness in his voice. It may happen at any moment, or you may have to wait for it. Days, or even weeks. But as to where it happens, I can show you now. Come upstairs with me. He took up the lamp and led the way out onto the landing, where he unlocked a door which shut in an enclosed staircase leading to the attic floor. Come up here whenever you like, he said. You will have a better chance alone. The stairs were uncarpeted, with a window behind them at the top, which lighted a narrow passage under the pitch of the high tiled roof. A closed door faced us at the end, and there were also doors to right and left. You can look into all these rooms, Jack said. You will find them empty, as we do not use them, even for lumber. But it is here, in the passage, that you must listen for the voice. The place was grim enough. I confess I did not care for it, but I was not going to show the white feather. You haven't told me yet what I should hear. It is a sort of whispering which travels along the wall on the left, beginning quite a way at the end, and as it draws near and passes you, it gets distinct. He touched the side wall of the passage as he spoke. Some acoustic peculiarity? I suggested. Very likely. I have often thought that, but the sound shapes itself into words, and sometimes, not always, they have meaning. Probably they differ to each hearer. Cannot say how they would come to you. We stood in silence for a while, and nothing happened. The place was close and oppressive, with its one window closed. Indeed, there seemed to be an unnatural deadness about the air. Jack moved first. It will not come tonight, so we had better go down. And he led the way with his lamp. At the foot of the staircase he locked the in-closing door, but left the key standing, and I confess to a certain relief when we were back in his pleasant sitting room, and the ghost hunt was over for the night. Marchmore had other attractions, and I tore myself away from them next morning on the pretext of letters to write in Jack's room. I did write one or two, that there might be some correspondence of mine in the letter-bag as a result. These epistles were of the briefest. Then I sought the attic staircase, closing the door after me to prevent surprise from below. The narrow passage, with its blank surroundings of shut doors, lighted only from the window behind me, was hardly more cheerful on a daylight view. I did not believe in the thing. I was determined not to believe in it. But, despite my skepticism, I experienced a creeping thrill about the spine and an odd sensation in my ears, which were strained to listen. The silence, however, was absolute. Of course, I said to myself, this happened to be a still day, and no doubt the phenomenon depended upon wind whistling round the eaves and crannies of the old house. Then I turned my attention to the 5 shut doors. Those on the right and left opened into 4 narrow garrets, empty as described to me, 2 of them lighted with small dormer windows, the other 2 by oblongs of thick glass let into the slope of the roof. Dismal chambers, which, apart from the ill reputation of this upper floor, would hardly be chosen for occupation. The 5th door at the end of the passage opened into a much larger and more cheerful room, which had the advantage of a broad, low window, nearly the width of the front gable, and also of a rusty fireplace at the side. Probably, at some distant date, children had used it for a playroom. It was empty of furniture, but in one corner was a dilapidated rocking horse and a lidless box half full of broken toys. I wondered whose were the children who once had played here unafraid. And then, as I turned away from the toy box, as if caused by its suggestion, I had the brief illusion that one of them stood beside me, a little fair-haired lad in a belted pinafore. Of course, it was a trick of the imagination, and I quickly saw how it was caused. This room also had a glazed pane let into the roof, and sunshine through the parting clouds had thrown down onto the floor below a shaft of light. After that I went away downstairs, but I resolved not to mention that odd fancy of mine to Jack, as he might attach it to some psychical meaning. He had described to me no visible ghost. He had spoken only of the whispers, and these I had not heard. I was in Jack's room the third evening of my stay, and we had been discussing quite other matters. I had not even the ghost in mind, when there was a patter of footsteps overhead. Quick, small footsteps, like a child. They seemed to run across the large attic and along the passage, and presently back again over the uncarpeted floors. "What is that?" I exclaimed. Jack did not give a direct answer. "It often comes before the whispers," he said. "If you come upstairs now, I believe you will hear." He took up the lamp and led the way. I noticed that he needed to unlock the door shutting in the staircase. His light showed the passage empty and doors shut, and the pattering footsteps had ceased. We stood, as before, facing the wall on the left, and presently, at the far end, the whispering began. However caused, it was undistinguishable from a human voice, and, as the whisperer approached, the vague sounds formed themselves into spoken words, but words without meaning. "Ah, Mont," and again, "Ah, Mont," and then, with a sort of sighing gasp, it added, "Yeah." The voice died away to our left, above the hollow of the stairs, and then, after the interval of a couple of minutes, began again by the shut door. The same words were repeated as it approached us the second time, and after that the stillness was unbroken. Jack, still holding up his lamp, one after another opened the 5 doors and showed the empty rooms. Then we went down into the smoking room, locking in the ghost as before. "Well," he said, "can you account for it?" "No," I answered. After we had settled back in our respective chairs and relit our pipes, Jack asked, "Did you distinguish words?" "Yes," I replied, and told him what I had heard. "Is it always the same?" "I heard it just as you did, and the phrase was new. I have no idea what it means. The words sometimes are 'come and play,' as if a child spoke them." The impression was too recent and vivid to allow of jesting, as I might have jested once. I inquired if there were any legend which explained the haunting. "No legend, but there is a saying that if one of us Lovels sees the child, he will not live to have children of his own." I heard no more while I was at Marchmoor, and, the day but one after, my visit came to an end. That fateful summer of 1914 brought many changes. Jack Lovell and I ceased to be students at the university. We both joined the army and went out immediately after the retreat, so we were in the November fighting, half forgotten now amidst all that has come after, but it was mentioned in the dispatches as heavy. A village was held by our regiment against stubborn assaults repulsed with the bayonet. Jack Lovell was wounded. How severely we others did not know, but there was much confusion. He was sent down to the base hospital, and 2 days after I got a shrapnel tear on the shoulder, a surface affair, but it began to look angry, and so I too was ordered down. I asked at once for Jack, and was deeply distressed to be told his hurt was serious, and he was not expected to live. I was allowed to see him, and presently was at his bedside, with his hand in mine. His face looked grey and pinched. It was hardly the face I knew. "You'll be going back to England, Eccles, lucky fellow," he said presently, and he smiled. Such a wan smile it was. "He would come too," I answered. "He mustn't lose heart about himself. You know the sort of thing one says, even when it is a lie." "Yes, but not the way you will," he answered. "The child at Marchmoor wants me. He was always whispering to me to come and play, and you know what you heard at the wall, what we both heard there." I've been thinking about it tonight. You know the place where we were fighting? Tell me the name of it. Eccles, tell me. Was he wondering? I thought so, but of course I answered him. Wasn't it near Armentières? Wasn't that what the voice whispered? You heard it too. Armentières. Why, of course it was. I know what he was driving at, though I did not understand it then. It's all as it should be. And then again he smiled, and turning his face from me, appeared to fall asleep. I went home for my wound to heal, but he remained behind. That is, what was mortal of him, for I left the best pal I ever had in a soldier's grave in France. The end. Bum bum bum. A translucent kid showed up in my room and smacked me in the face and said, "Yo, I'm a ghost." But he hadn't said anything about a slapping ghost, only whispers, so I figured it must have been my imagination. Yeah, exactly. I saw a ghost, but I wasn't told there would be a ghost, so it probably wasn't a ghost. So yeah, that was that one. I like that one. Again, it's like that's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. But yeah, good. Classic, exactly. Like, and frankly, a lot of these are going to be classics. I suppose, like, a thought that well, it's not that I've only just had. I guess it's sort of one we've discussed a lot. That about the context in which these stories are delivered, because this is obviously a story. This is obviously a story. There's obviously a story that is, in this context, published as part of a collection of ghost stories. And so it's sort of hard to escape the knowledge going in that you are reading a ghost story, and so therefore there will be like ghost story tropes and trappings and other such words, like fingerprints that you're looking for. Like you know it's a ghost story, and so you know what you get going in, and you can look out for, you know, like if for instance you have a collection of short stories and they're all sorts of different things. There's comedy stuff and there's dramatic things, and then you come across one that's just like from the perspective of this boy in school on a winter's day and everyone seems to be ignoring him. You're more likely to walk it, for me at least, I feel like you're more likely to walk face first into some sort of surprise. Be like, oh wait, I didn't realise I was reading a ghost story, until it starts to dawn on you halfway through, that kind of thing. And not that surprise and a twist are the only things that matter, but that control of information is always an interesting thing. And yeah, if you are literally reading a collection of ghost stories, you know going in that you are reading ghost stories, and so therefore when someone says, I was walking along a lonely road that I didn't know too well late one night, and it was late and I was tired and I was hungry and I needed somewhere to rest, and I happened to see a rickety looking building by the side of the road. Like, that's a haunted house. We know it's a haunted house. You're going to find I went in and the innkeeper was curiously dressed in a fashion that was not of my time, and he seemed he's a ghost. And I stayed in my room, and there were weird sounds that woke me from my sleep, and I investigated them with a candle, and I told myself, no matter, it's probably just the locals making noise. They're ghosts. The house is a ghost, the innkeeper's a ghost, there's ghosts, it's ghosts all the way down, mate. You do have the advantage of knowing the genre. Yeah, and like, you probably did at the time too, in which these were written and published. But it's always an interesting subject to me, and I guess partly, I suppose, why that's on my mind is because the stories I'm reading tonight are taken from different eras. Like, so this one was published in this one, like the one I just read, was published in what, 1910? Was that? Did I say? Where are you? Where were you? No, not that one. Whispering Wall, there we go. 1916. So yeah, that's from 1916. The other one, the first one, if she bends... was it If She Bends, She Breaks? That was from like 1983 or something. Sorry. Flicking through books, don't mind me. Wrong story. 1984. Yeah. You'll read rearrangements of the same half-dozen ghost story tropes over and over again forever. Yeah, and that's fair. Hey, welcome back, Thunder. Need to stop for the night? Completely fair. Yeah, and I suppose that's like the folk stories book that I've got. That you really a lot of these are essentially just retellings of the same tropes, and that's okay. And I think as much it's about adjusting my own expectations of what I want to get out of them, because again, not every story you've got the sort of increasingly endlessly escalating stakes of like ooh, I'm dropping frames. Has my internet just gone? Hello? Have I stopped dropping frames? Hi. Am I back? That was weird. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. I just glanced over to OBS. It was chugging for a minute there. Yeah, I just glanced over to OBS and my connection went down into the red and the dropped frames counter just started flying up. Yeah, okay. Well, that would be a shame if the internet here has just started. Like, internet suffers a blip for like 3 seconds, and I'm immediately like, well, maybe the internet here sucks and I need to get a new ISP. No, it's fine. But it's been basically rock steady, and it would be a real shame if that's any kind of sign of unreliability. But I'm back. Good. I feel like it's a good place to ask continue. Does anyone know where the quote, I've been running for so long that I don't know who I am if I stop? I feel like I know a number of different quotes like that, or I've heard a number of different quotes like that, but I don't know. That sounds familiar, but I couldn't tell you where it's from. I don't know if anyone in chat will know. I feel like I've heard stuff like it. Although, mind you, I feel like if you like that, you might well like some of the songs by Radical Face. It sounds like the kind of lines he would write in some of his songs. That's, yeah, not a million miles away from some of his stuff. What was I saying? Talking about, I guess, genre and tropes and stuff. And yeah, I think it's as much like adjusting my own expectations, because you can't always have a twist and a shock reveal and like, oh wait, there was a ghost, because you know you're reading a ghost story, and you know as soon as someone goes, I encountered a strange fellow, that's the ghost. Or I stayed into a new house, or I checked into a hotel that I'd never stayed before in a town that the hotel's haunted. And there's only so many ways you can like obfuscate that. And so yeah, I think as much for me, it's like learning to actually take delight in the telling of the story rather than, and I think I'm getting better at that, rather than just like, what's the plot? What's the plot? Like, everything's got to serve the plot, and like, give me something new that I've never read before, because yeah, it's impossible to do that, frankly. And yeah, and then you get into the whole sort of Shyamalan problem of like, oh yeah, we're just looking for the twist. And the guy makes perfectly decent films aside from that, but there was that whole era of like, everything has got to have a twist. And yeah, and some of those can be sort of badly delivered. But that's a whole other discussion. But yeah, I think it's interesting going between different eras. Current hyperfixation songs are, is that Just Right and Python by Got7? I don't know who that is. As soon as you can listen to anything that isn't those two songs on repeat, we'll absolutely come back to this and give that a listen. Thank you for the recommendation. No worries. I have no idea if his is the kind of stuff you would like. So like there is no obligation to like it or even listen to it, frankly. I get recommendations all the time that we just had this earlier with Amherst going like, hey, listen to this stuff, and I did. It turns out it was good, but I really struggled to get around to things that's recommended to me, so yeah, don't worry about it. Anyway, I'm just sitting talking, filling time. Should we have the last story for tonight, which is also linked there at the top of chat. And this is one from 1990, so again, it's over 30 years ago. 1990 for me was like 10 years ago. And if I stopped to think about it, it was 20 years ago. And it was, in fact, 35 years ago. Stop that. Yes, I too would like to stop the unceasing passage of time. Oh, it's K-pop. I would have guessed K-pop from the name, but I know basically nothing about K-pop. Because as just discussed, well, actually no, I was going to say, because as just discussed, I'm 42. Lots of people my age listen to K-pop and J-pop and stuff. Yeah. So no, that's not a reason at all. Mrs. Pants has been listening to Blackpink. Oh, fair enough, yeah. Anyway, that's... This is so far away from classic literature, and... You can't use that excuse either then? No, I'm sorry, Parola. No. Neither of us gets that one. You can just not listen to something. That's fine. But we can't use our age as an excuse. I'm sorry, yeah. Anyway... On with tonight's scheduled vintage fiction because it's from 35 years ago. Oh, and it's a ghost story. It's a spooky story. It's called. Okay, I'm gonna serious face on. We got a stream to close out. We're gonna do this. We're gonna get through this chat. We're gonna be okay. This is from 1990, and it is titled Dr. Matthew's Ghost Story by Penelope Fitzgerald. When I was a young man, I took part in any dig that was going, whether it was likely to lead to anything or not. You see, I was set in my bent very early. I mean the discoveries that can be made from old texts, and the discoveries that can be coaxed out of the earth itself, and even more from brick and stone. One would say a peaceful occupation enough. Anyway, it happened that our summer expedition of 1869 was, of all places, to the fields opposite what is now Mr. Turner's farm. Only there was no house near it then, and no Mr. Turner. The name at the farm was Hinton, and instead of the present road there was a cart track across the fields, which had been raised where it passed the farm gates into something like a bridge. It had been strengthened at that point with brickwork. After a summer storm, you could watch the sand martins sliding in and out of the drainage holes, and I don't think I have ever seen so many swifts. The bricks were very old, certainly medieval. It had been established by the man in charge of our little expedition, Edward Nisbet. You will not remember him. That between the second half of the 13th century and 1427 there had been a small nunnery at this unlikely spot. The nuns were the Sisters of the Seven Sorrows. The dedication had been to Saint Salome, the Virgin Mary's midwife. The farm, at the time, may well have been connected with the nunnery. All four of us stayed there, sleeping two and two in the four-posters in the garrets. The farmer's wife was pleased enough to have our custom, Selling eggs and poultry and taking in passing guests were the only extra money she could hope for, and how many people were likely to pass there in those days before the road was made? "I hope the young gentleman slept sound," she asked us the first morning. We hastened to reassure her, except for Nisbet, who, while scrupulously polite, cared very much for accuracy. "Nothing of great importance, but you and your friends were singing and talking very late, Mrs. Hinton." "You mean me and Hinton? We're never late retiring. We work too hard for that." The rest of us, discerning a little resentment or self-righteousness here, said that we had heard nothing. I had slept in the same room as Nisbet, and I had certainly heard nothing. We had paid Hinton to have the topsoil turned over before we came, so that we could start our measurements and drawings at once. We had also hired 2 farm workers, who gave it as their opinion that the site looked like nothing so much as a couple of rows of piggeries. The ground plan of the convent, to tell the truth, seemed likely to turn out to be nothing very particular. The only real interest of the place lay in an account given in 1426 of a special visitation ordered by the Bishop of Ely. At that time, things were in an unsatisfactory state. There were only 2 very old women there who still wore the habit, though both were dirty and neglected, and a third who, though also old, was said to be of immoral life. The roof was described as not sufficient to keep out the rain. The bishop seems to have sent a second commissioner, empowered, if necessary, to evict the women and rehouse them in the convent of St. Radegund. But the place was unimportant, and no further records survive. If the bishop's visitor arrived, there is no means of knowing what happened to him. By the time the road was built, there had been nothing for some 300 years to show where once the nunnery stood. The grass covered it. The cattle moved over it. Nisbet was no better the following night, when he actually woke me by dashing cold water in my face, and told me that he could not only hear the voices, but, quite distinctly, what was said. In, in, again and again, and once, in with him, under. The voices rose very high, higher than a woman's, he thought. They had been terrible to him. The idea of some kind of joke on the part of Mrs. Hinton arose, but to be rejected at once. Mrs. Hinton laughed once, and only once, during one short stay, when one of our party tripped over the worn front doorstep of the farm kitchen and measured his length on the floor. Then she did laugh, in fact wept and wheezed with laughter. She didn't, she said, in the usual run, see anything like that from one year's end to the other, and it had done her good. "One must be glad to have done our hostess good," said Nisbet. "I suppose, by the way, she can't be susceptible to rheumatism." "I suppose the whole fen country is ague-ish," I said. "You don't feel a touch of it, Matthews?" "Did he?" I asked. "I'm in pain," he answered, and now that I looked at him, it being a feature of living closely with anyone that you cease looking at them attentively, I saw that there was a leaden paleness, a darkness around his eyes and nostrils which would normally be a symptom of the very ill. "What sort of pain?" "There is a pressure. I feel constricted." "That's in your mind, Nisbet." "Not in my mind." "Let us go get some fresh air." We went down to the diggings, although it was only just light. Nisbet once suggested that we ought to open up the brickwork with the culverts in the ditch, I have already referred to the culverts as being certainly as old as the convent. The field, of course, no longer relied on them for its drainage. Still, if they were dismantled, they would have to be put back, and neither of our farm workers seemed very confident about being able to do this. To our astonishment, they both expressed the opinion that it was a bad thing to meddle about with old drainage work, and that there was no telling what was underneath it. "But that's exactly what we're here for," I said. "That's what we're paying you for. We particularly want to know what is underneath it." They said they'd known jobs like that before, which had ended with the ground caving in and collapsing altogether. Pressed, they could not give the exact details. I am sure, however, that we should not have persisted with the idea if Nisbet had not shown such a sickly eagerness and a disposition, while the rest of us were at our surveying and note-taking, to linger round the culvert. "Hang it," the others said, "he's nosing about like a dog round a sewer." He went out before we did, and came back later. Hoping to lighten the atmosphere, I asked him if he had seen anything in particular. To my surprise, he said he thought he had. "Well, what, or whom?" Reluctantly, he told me that it was an old woman who had opened her mouth at him as though gaping or gobbling. She was quite toothless. Now, 40 years ago, old women without teeth were more common than not. If they were poor, they had no remedy. I asked him why he should care about that. He answered that he had been afraid she would touch him. I would have felt like laughing if he hadn't looked as he did. "Where was she going?" I asked. "To Guestingley, I suppose. There was nowhere else she could go." He repeated, "I was afraid she was going to touch me." I forget whether I mentioned that the other 2 members of our party were medical students. Although that by no means proved they knew anything very much, I decided to ask them something about the effects of strain, and whether we oughtn't to advise or persuade Nisbet to go home as soon as possible. Before I had the opportunity to do this, however, Nisbet told me that the night before, during which I must admit I had been sleeping soundly, he had got up and gone down to the ditch again to examine the brickwork in the bright moonlight. "Well, and was your old woman there?" He had seen 3 women, he said. They were down on hands and knees, pawing at something large and dark which they had brought with them. It was the naked body of a man. The man was not dead, because there was some movement of the legs and feet. Then, by a process which Nisbet could not see, the man, whose bones must have been crushed and collapsed and his body distorted into a shape of grotesque length and thinness, was being inserted inch by inch into the culvert. He never made a sound, but the feet still moved. And what did they say, these women? They said in, and then under. "There'll be a moon tonight," I said. "I can't help feeling that it's a good deal easier to observe things by day, but if you want to do this night walking again, I shall come with you." He looks at me as if he couldn't remember exactly who I was. I should have said that by this time he was eating almost nothing, whereas the rest of us, after working all day in the open air, had very large appetites. We could not, of course, ask him not to sit at the table with us, but it would have been much more pleasant if he had not. Mrs. Hinton's feeling, obviously, was that he had paid for his board, so he ought to be given it. She put down great platefuls in front of him, and took them away untouched without a word. We went to our rooms and to bed. "What the blazes are you doing?" I shouted, waking up suddenly. I had gone to sleep, and Nisbet, who had not undressed, was just going out of the room. I put on my Norfolk jacket and followed. Once outside the house, although normally Nisbet never ran, he began to run. I caught up with him at the same wretched place. He was lying down on the ditch, still damp and full of long weeds and grasses in the height of summer. "I was waiting for you, Matthews." "Waiting for what? Have you found anything?" "I wasn't looking for anything. I know what's there. My point is, have you got a sharp knife?" "What for? I dare say I could fetch one from the kitchen." All this should have been done in silence. "You must cut my tongue out. That will be the work for you to do." I was determined to get him back to the farm. His mind seemed to have given way, which was a relief rather than otherwise. At that age I was reasonably strong, rather stronger than Nisbet perhaps. They talk about dragging people away, but how can you do it unless you can get hold of an arm or a leg? We were wrestling, both covered with grass and dirt, Nisbet repeated again and again with an unpleasant tone of voice. In, sweetheart, in. This won't do, old fellow, I said. His in made my flesh creep. I wasn't getting the better of him, and suddenly he reached over and stuck his right hand and half his arm in the culvert. It was a night of broken cloud, and I could hardly see what I was doing. I got down and lay shoulder to shoulder with him, putting my left arm under his left armpit. Then I began to heave. It wasn't simply a question of his being caught or being stuck in the drain tunnel. Someone was hauling against me, stroke by stroke, to get him away. "Pull together, Nisbet," I shouted in his ear. "Imagine we're both back at school. The tug of war, Nisbet. Think of that. Heave!" I did not know where Nisbet had been at school, but I couldn't think of any other appeal to make. From what I could see, he was not looking much like a schoolboy. He was doing nothing to help me. He was doing his frantic best, in fact, to get free from me. Still, in. The only chance I had was when, as at last he did, lolling sideways, he fainted. Now the arm came out free, like a recoil. The hand had not gone. It was still joined at the wrist, but it was bones and tendons only. All the flesh had been dragged or sucked off to the last shreds. They had it all. I said aloud, "He'll bleed to death," but my shouting, "Pull together," I suppose, and so forth, must have been much louder than I knew, and the other two fellows were running in their nightshirts down from the farm. I did not think of what they would feel when they saw poor Nisbet. Neither of them had dealt before with a major hemorrhage. Still, once he was on the kitchen table, they were able to manage a tourniquet. I fetched the doctor myself. I have forgotten now what explanation I gave. "We're just on a quiet little expedition," I said, "during the summer vacation." The doctor said he had never, in all his experience, been called into an accident like this, particularly as the result of a quiet little expedition. I do not know that you are ever likely to hear much more about this story. Certainly, Nisbet, although he recovered, was always very unwilling to talk about it. Because of his disability, he never took orders, for which he had been intended. Apart from the loss of his arm up to the elbow, there were some impairments to the brain. I believe he went to live abroad. I think in Belgium. Yes, it was Belgium. You will ask, what of the excavations? They were never taken in hand again, although there was necessarily some digging when the road was built. I made it my business at that time to find out whether anything worth noticing had been turned up. Yes, an ancient male skeleton, a curiosity and rather a horrible one. It appeared to have been crushed and rolled up and then stretched or elongated. It was difficult to see how such a thing could have been carried out, particularly if it was done before the man was dead. There were a few rags of flesh, rather like the leather tongues of shoes, cured, you see, by the damp. To historians, much of the most interesting items were some scraps of parchment which had been thrust or stuffed at some point in a quite unseemly way into the corpse. The few letters, there were no complete words, which could be deciphered made it almost certain that these scraps were part of a quoniam igitur, a writ of eviction issued by the bishop, following on a second visit and inspection. You must remember that although there are more than 10,000 medieval writs of significavit in the Public Record Office, there was, up to that time, not a single example of quoniam igitur. You will understand, therefore, the historian's excitement. But it must be said that historians, in my experience, are excitable people. The end. Thank you for listening. And thank you, Dave, for coming over with your friends. Your viewers, for bringing them here. I hope... Did you continue doing... Marvel XCOM? What is the thingies? Yeah. Burn on historians? Hell yeah. Yeah, get got historians. You excitable lot. No, you drove a bus? Ah, okay. Well, was that fun? Was it the bus simulator that was free at Christmas on Epic? Did you do that? I hope that was good. Excellent. Well, I say again, thank you for the raid. Everyone has come over. You probably know who we are or what we're about, and if not, you've figured it out by now. Hello. We read, well, I was going to say old stories. That one was from 1990, which is shockingly an old story. So yeah, you may or may not have decided you need to get more work done. That's fair. Yeah, I didn't know whether to give a content warning for that one, because I feel like broadly the content of it comes under the blanket of like, these are spooky ghost stories, and I guess because a lot of them, pretty much everything we read is from like 70 plus years ago, they don't tend to go hard on like gore and body horror and stuff, whereas this one felt just a little bit more Amigara fault, because again it's from a different era, and so yeah, I didn't know how much of a warning to give, but I hope that wasn't too much for anybody listening. Yeah, I like that one. I enjoyed it. Little bit of a goopy one. Yeah, I mean some of the ones I've read from Poe also got a little bit that way. That were the one about the body, the spooky story about the dead body. Yeah, that really narrows it down. You have kimchi as a reward / bribe for getting work done. Nice. But yeah, that was the last story I was going to read for tonight. And yeah, I'm glad to have actually gotten through all 3 stories. Nice. But yeah, I enjoyed those. I think they're fun. I think they're good stories. And yeah, they honestly kind of make me want to go and write some stuff. I don't know what. This isn't Sam's going to go write short stories, because wanting to write short stories and actually doing it are 2 very different. One is a lot more difficult than the others. You liked them, excellent selection. Well, thank you. And like, that's the thing. I couldn't have named any of those authors. Oh, they're so different. Yes, they are. Yeah, I couldn't have named any of those authors, which is why I didn't put the authors' names in the title, because I feel like sometimes if you say like, we've got a story from this person, then there's always a chance of people looking and going, yeah, I don't know who that is, and then not looking. Whereas if you're like, hey, we've got some cool stories, maybe come in and check them out, I don't know, you might like them, then yeah, you might stop by. Writing and wanting to write are 2 very different things. Yes, like, extremely. But yeah, like specifically the if she bends, she breaks. I don't know why that one really is like, that's got into my head as like bro, you need to write some stuff. Like that's, I've dropped more frames? Okay, I guess my internet's just having a one this evening. I apologise for that, folks. I hope it didn't affect the story or interrupt things. I hope you didn't miss anything. Nobody said anything if you did, so you know, that's good at least. Yeah, it's just a little hiccup. Okay. You really liked the if it bends it breaks. Yeah, I did too. I mean, again, I liked all of them, but that one for me was, I think, my highlight of these. As soon as you click back and to say something is back. Okay, well, that's good at least, I guess. Rosie, hello, welcome in. But yeah, you've you've got here just at the end. I'm gonna wrap things up. Is there? I'm choking. Oh, Billiam's on. We go over and say hello to Billiam. That might be nice. Yeah, let's go see Billiam. We've not seen him for a bit. Also, Skittle. Skittle's also on, and looks like they're showing Fifi, just Skittle's cat. Do we? Okay, yeah. I'm won over by the cat cam on Skittle's stream, so let's go over there. Right. Thank you for coming over here. You've been a wonderful, lovely audience. Gonna go. I want you all to have a good rest of the weekend. I'm not sure what the stream schedule is going to be like for this next week, because Lucy is pretty busy. But I think she's also very busy next week. So, yeah, we're going to go over to see Skittle. Say hello, chuck them a follow. They do very good art. And it's just a very chill stream to go and hang out and spend the rest of your, if you're in the UK or Europe, Saturday evening. So, yeah, thank you for being here. This has been fun. I've enjoyed these stories. And we will see you on the next one. Goodbye and good night.